there are certain situations that make you begin to wonder whether this is a reason, or maybe it's not, but I think it is a reason to listen to what the likes of George Weah, the president of Liberia, what he is saying. He's saying that Africa must listen to its people. Africa must look at action to be taken against those sit-tight leaders. How can one family choose to be in charge of a nation, run it to the ground, and then step on it and scrub their feet and trash it to nonsense? How can one family do that? One family for almost 60 years. This young Mr. Bongo, who's really not young, 64 years old, who's not now been pushed out of office, wants a third term. He's been there for more than 12 years. He wants a third term to keep him there. 2009 till now, that's about 13 years that he's been in office. And he still wants to remain in office. He's probably grooming his son and his daughter to become the next president and prime minister of the country and become the ministers as well. So it's just, it doesn't make any sense. So two clear things. Number one, coup is wrong. It should never be allowed and encouraged in Africa. But at the same time, African leaders, starting from our own dear nation, the largest black nation on earth, Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, responsibility and weight of being an African leader is on your shoulder. You are the only one that's being invited for a side meeting with President Biden. You have to make it clear that every leader on the continent of Africa that chooses to sit tight and turn a nation into their family business must be kicked out of office, legally or illegally, by every means possible. They have to be kicked out. And you have to look at how we make Africa better. So, Rufai and Ayo, yeah. I think I've said my piece.
Rufai.
Ayo, today words fail me. When you take a snapshot of our beautiful continent, the beauty is fading away because of the madness of its leaders. The beauty of Africa is fading away because people that are supposed to be proudly Africa, that are supposed to call on Mama Africa every time to bring peace and succor to its people, are the ones taking the peace away from its people. The beauty of Africa is fading away. And I ask, where is Africa today? All over Africa, we have returned to the era of coups. Between 1957 and 1990, we had over 100 coups in Africa. In the space of a couple of months now, we've had 2 coups. The question is, where is it going to happen next on the African continent? What starts the cycle of all these coups? Bad leadership. But like I always say, you can't solve illegality with another illegality. Because the truth is, you just set up a chain reaction. So with this, I would like to condemn that coup this morning in Gabon. I would also condemn Ali Bongo, the sit-tight president of Gabon, that inherited the presidency like it's a family stool from his father, Omar Bongo. Despite the wealth and the oil resource in Gabon, never provided anything for the citizens, but provided all for themselves. Despite his own ill health, we all saw when Ali Bongo had a stroke and he had to move around in a gingerly form, but he still went ahead to sit tight in power. And that's what you see all over Africa. Should I talk about Bouteflika? Should I talk about Emerson Mnangagwa? That now he's won another election that are highly disputed in Zimbabwe. Ali Bongo pushed himself on and on. He finally won the election, but the coup plotters said, no, we can't allow this to continue in our country. When are we going to have that Africa that Thomas Isodowe Noel Sankara talks about? When are we going to have that Africa that Thomas Sankara will always say, la colonialism, abar, imperialism, abar, down with imperialism, down with colonialism, down with coups, bad leadership, abar. When are we going to have that Africa? That sweet Africa. That bad leadership, imperialism, colonialism, everything bad will be a thing of the past. Today I cry for Africa, but I hope I don't cry too long.
Well, Gabon or Republic, Gabonais in its French, the French word for the country called Gabon, should or ought to be one of the richest countries on the continent of Africa, especially because of its many resources and the small population. So in terms of per capita income, it should be a thriving economy. However, unfortunately, due to bad leadership, has already been explained, and what almost seems like a monarchy, the country has not been able to achieve its full potential. And we saw reactions just yesterday into this morning. We got the reports that the military in Gabon have staged a coup, citing bad leadership and doing it on behalf of the Gabonese people and taking back their country. Already it's been established how many years the President Ali Bongo has been in office, his father inheriting the position from his father, Omar Bongo. And the fact that even though in many countries on the continent of Africa, we talk about the fact that we practice democracy, but democracy looks like an imperialism, looks like monarchy system, looks like a family business, doesn't look anything like what democracy should look like. And in a flawed democracy, you will find instances like this. This will make the 8th coup in recent times on the continent of Africa, a number of them situated in West Africa. Now here in Central Africa, Gabon has, if it's successful, will be the 8th. Now, a few things to note. The elections which produced or reproduced Ali Bongo as president on Sunday when he was announced as president, having said to have won 60% of the vote, was said to have been flawed and wrought with irregularities. One, they said some foreign broadcast stations were not allowed to participate. Two, some foreign observers as well were prevented from accessing. They actually cut off internet source and power at some point during the elections. They also said nationwide there were people who had protested, yet the government or the government didn't listen to the agitations of the people and presented a winner following that grossly flawed elections. Following that, we have seen the result. Again, as has been established, there is no justification for an unconstitutional response to a democracy, which a coup is. However, as has been established as well, especially during the Nigerian coup, if we don't deal with the civilian coup, then we should prepare ourselves for a military coup. And what do I mean by civilian coups? Where governments or individuals decide to make leadership or governing over the people a personal ambition and make it that of a family business. When the rule of law is disregarded and disobeyed flagrantly, when the leaders want a lifetime presidency for themselves with illegal pushing of their terms in office, these are civilian coups. And so if we must condemn military coups, we also must condemn the root which are civilian coups across countries in Africa. I'm hoping that ECOWAS and the AU will respond to this and that we can contain this matter very soon.
One of the most politically unstable regions in addition to insecurity as well as economic decline. So basically, people are wondering what's happening. But again, when you talk to political analysts in the region, they will tell you about the deprivations, the economic malaise, the insecurity that's been there, and the inability of governments in power, democratically elected governments in power, to deal with these situations. Corruption is also one of the major factors. And now it will be interesting to see how the African Union reacts to this. We know their initial reaction is to suspend countries, member countries that where coups have taken place. We've seen that with Mali, we've seen that with Burkina Faso, Guinea, and now Niger. And it's expected very soon they will also announce that Gabon is suspended from the membership of the African Union. But what is interesting is we hardly will see any effective sanctions being applied on Gabon simply because of its mineral resources, something that we've seen happening in Mali and Burkina Faso right now. The expectation of many political analysts in West Africa and Central Africa was that when there is a coup, the strangulation, economic strangulation, should be applied to enforce the rule that the military should go back to the barracks and restore democracy. But what we continue to say in these countries is that mining of mineral resources and oil continue in those countries. So basically, people are watching. But here in Niger, people are just waking up to the news, and it will gladden the heart of the military authorities here that at least one other African country have seen their way, at least. Marlene?
Okay, Ahmed Idris there for us in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Let's get the perspective of Owigwe Agwego. He's a security analyst for Afropolitica, which is a security consultancy. He joins us now from Ankara. Firstly, give us your understanding of what is happening in Gabon at the moment.
Yes, I think the coup in Gabon, it came as a surprise, but to some extent, not really, because if you go back to 2016, for instance, where there was an election, the election was seen as fraudulent, who protested, and that was Ali Bongo's second election. Then there was a coup attempt in 2019, and they cited the fact that those elections were fraudulent and was not really representative of the will of the people. So we fast forward to last weekend's election. Again, we're seeing the same pattern of people thinking they voted in one direction, or they were never given an opportunity, to vote for the candidates that they chose. And that kind of widespread dissatisfaction with the electoral process, I think I have to underscore this fact that the coup in Gabon is very different from what we are seeing in other parts of West Africa, because while that is more about security and governance, this is specifically about the electoral process, because time and time again, we see these patterns repeat in Gabon, and the military comes in and they make the same argument.
That's a very good point that you make there. So what you're saying is there will be support for this coup?
Yes, already. If you look at the streets of Gabon, people are celebrating and celebrating the coup. And even if you look at the statement of the pushes, you would see that they are very much specifically talking about transition and restoration of institutions. So again, that goes back to, like I said, the electoral process, and they're dissolving all of the institutions like the Senate, hoping that in the transition process, they would maybe look at the constitution and also look at how to strengthen state institutions regarding political process.
I guess the question is what happens next and how united is the military in what is taking place right now. We've been listening to our correspondent talk about the influence of France in Gabon, the historical influence, the two military bases that exist in France at the moment. I mean, how do you think that's going to play into things?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the latest blow to French influence on the continent. Very recently, President Macron was talking about democracy. And it's very interesting to know that he didn't even, no comments yet, but I'm sure they're going to condemn this coup, just like they did condemn the previous attempt in 2019. The African Union also will step in to condemn this. But Gabon plays a very strategic role for France. It has two bases in the country. Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels of oil per day. But all of that has not really translated to economic progress for the country. However, I think what is key to watch out for is how ECOWAS is going to respond, because while we have been seeing coups in West Africa and ECOWAS has been in the spotlight, this is now the first we're seeing in Central Africa, and how they're going to respond to this, if they are going to follow the same script as ECOWAS and in tackling the issue in Gabon.
We have, of course, seen this increasingly anti-French sentiment in other West African nations, more notably in Niger recently. Is it a similar situation in Gabon?
Yes, the coup in Gabon I think it's more about dissatisfaction with the electoral process and the fact that one family has ruled the country for about 56 years. Before Ali Bongo, his father, he took over from his father in 2009. And he has been his father ruled for 40 years. So it is seen as the democratic process doesn't really work. And France might not really be keen to complain about this type of dynasty kind of rule. But people in the country, I think, unlike in Mali and Burkina Faso, where we are seeing Russian flags, there's no indication of that yet. So it is, and the sentiment is not necessarily about anti-France, like we're seeing in Niger and Mali, but more about determining the future of Gabon and focusing more on its own electoral processes.
Let's talk a little bit more then about the country. As you say, rich in oil, it's an OPEC member. It's also a key producer of this energy transitional material like magnesium. I mean, we know the borders have been shut. I mean, what are the wider international ramifications of what is going on there? Yeah,
the oil markets are still stable. They don't seem to be to be responding to this shock. That is because, like I did say, Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels per day, so not so much significant, but not enough to cause shock across oil markets. However, I think it's crucial to watch closely how regional countries and regional countries that are going to respond, because that would determine whether or not this is going to be a coup that stays, or a coup that would not be able to to handle the pressure, and that's something to watch out for. Again, we need to also look at what is the state of former President Bongo, if he's in good condition, or if we've not seen anything about that, and that will be something to watch out for also.
Okay, really good to get your perspective. Obigwe Agwegu, a security analyst for Afro Politica, speaking to us there from Ankara.